The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. We are joined by Spencer Day. He's a #1 Billboard jazz and pop singer and songwriter. And let's just say that you might have been seeing him in quite a number of places. He's been seen everywhere from Lincoln Center to the Hollywood Bowl. He has been seen in the press. He's been getting a lot of reviews, such as Compelling by Time Out New York, Prodigiously Talented by The Village Voice, Brilliant by the San Francisco Chronicle. The Washington Post talked about his cool jazz sensibilities and cleverly crafted tales. He is a singer, songwriter, recording, and performing artist. I've been enjoying this artist very much. Spencer Day, how are you?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's a great pleasure. A lot of people might be wondering, where on the spectrum of music, where would you find Spencer Day? I've been listening to you and I wonder how I would categorize you.
I've been wondering that myself for many years, and I know there's many industry people who over the years I think have very much liked what I do, but I know that's been a constant, I guess, quandary, I don't want to say issue, with a lot of industry people, record labels, et cetera, because I've never really thought in terms of genre. I just think in terms of writing good songs. I would say that I'm a singer-songwriter first and foremost, but that I pull a lot from the Great American Songbook. And, there's a lot of great contemporary people such as Nellie McKay or Rufus Wainwright or, even Fiona Apple. Tons of people who I feel are very inspired by that. Even the Beatles, would credit Rodgers and Hart as one of their top influences. So what I would say I like to do is to bring my love of jazz and the Great American Songbook, but put it in a contemporary pop aesthetic that seems relevant to, the world going on today, and still write about issues in love as I see it happening in the year 2018. So, I would say I'm jazz inspired, but, I think for the jazz purists out there, I can sing jazz. I can, improvise and phrase, and I love to sing standards as well. And I'm actually working on a record of that, I think, coming up, which I very much look forward to. But I would say first and foremost, probably singer-songwriter. But, I was thinking about this last night, actually, a friend, because they were asking me what genre Paul Simon's Graceland would be. And I was like, wow, I don't know what you would have called that. It's kind of, Afro-inspired pop. And that's what's great about it. I think, for a lot of musicians I know, we feel like we want to transcend those things. I think categories are important because if you're trying to find an artist, or maybe you heard a song on the radio and you're trying to describe it to someone, those descriptive terms matter. But on many occasions, I think those terms can be a bit limiting because I've had many people say to me, and I've gotten to write in Nashville many times, you're like, oh, I don't like country music, or I don't like jazz. And so when you make a broad generalization, right, that you might be cutting yourself off from an experience that you might really enjoy. But I guess the short of it is I have no idea.
I'm really glad that you mentioned Graceland. I was in Washington, D.C. I saw one of Paul Simon's last concert tour shows, and he was doing Graceland, and there were certain parts of it that I was thinking, gosh, this sounds like country music, like the little pedal steel guitar part. And so that makes me wonder, if we were to go snooping through the Spencer Day music collection, whether it be your CDs or if we were looking through your phone, what you listen to, what would we be surprised by?
Oh, gee, that's a very good question. I suppose I have more hip hop than people might think. Especially, I love some, classics like a Tribe Called Quest is a popular one. I think I have a decent amount of country on there. Everything from Loretta Lynn, and I love Alison Krauss, and I grew up with Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline. But you would find John Coltrane, and then you would find Shostakovich and Ravel. I mean, it would seem very musically schizophrenic, I feel like, to anyone who listened. I'm trying to think of anything they would find shocking. I suppose I have a few, what some people call guilty pleasures. I don't find them guilty because I really love ABBA or others. I just like good melodies and songwriting, and I don't for me, I don't require perfection in either a live performance when I go to see it or in a recording. What I require to get excited is what I feel is authenticity and being taken musically to a place I feel I haven't been. I think what you wouldn't find is a lot of very mainstream. I don't say mainstream because there's some great pop. I love Pharrell. I love Portugal the Man. There's tons of great music still being written, but I don't like music that sounds like a car commercial or that sounds where everything's just perfectly in the right place and it feels like it isn't taking any risks. So I have, some PJ Harvey, that might be a surprise, some Tori Amos. So I suppose I have, what almost would be considered punk rock, The Clash, David Bowie. I guess it depends. Shocking is all relative to what other people like, but I feel like most of those things I mentioned might be a surprise, for a lot of people who think I have the voice that everyone's mother wants to hear sing their favorite wedding song. But all those things are fun to pull on. And when I do a live show, one of my favorite things is to take a song like that, like Soul Love by David Bowie, and do it as a bossa nova, or Depeche Mode, Enjoy the Silence works beautifully as a bossa nova in a way. And one of the things I love to do is to see that element of surprise when people are halfway through the song and they're like, I feel like I know this. And then the look of recognition on their face. And for me, when I get to do a cover, that's what I really think about is, can I put a stamp on this that really feels authentic to me and is really going to take this cover to a place that even I wouldn't have expected it would be able to go in a somewhat effortless way.
On that note, it seems like every singer has one song, either it's actually written on a piece of paper or it's just in their head. They know there's this certain song. One day I'm going to get around to doing my version. As you said, I'm going to put my stamp on this song. Can you tell us about a song that you've been aching to sing?
Oh, yeah, there's so many. As far as one that I haven't touched, and I don't know whether this will seem a cliche or not, but I remember the first time I heard it was on a jukebox in Silver Lake about 20 years ago. And I teared up because I hadn't heard it before. And the recording of it's so beautiful, I don't know what I would do with it, or maybe I would sing it on my wedding day. But I recently on my Facebook fan page asked people, what is a cover you'd like to hear me do? And one that I feel would be a challenge, but for whatever reason, it always struck a chord in that record of hers called First Take by Roberta Flack. But I really do love The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. I just love that song, but I don't know whether I'm up to the challenge of it, but that's one maybe on my wedding day or something like that. So that's a hard day to sing song too without making your way through it. But there's a simplicity to it. I love that there's no rhymes in the song, which is rare to find, kind of like Moonlight in Vermont. There's no rhymes in it. I would say that as far as songs that feel well known, that always feel like, oh gosh, how am I gonna top that? There's so many. It's like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. We've all heard it probably too many times, or Hallelujah by Jeff Buckley, which I've loved to sing, but there's some that people are like, okay, we've got to put a moratorium on that. But those are the ones that I think when I step away from them, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe like Elvis or Marilyn Monroe or other things that we're so used to seeing in our faces, pop culture, Frank Sinatra, of course, that we're so used to that it's hard to step away from it and realize that not only the cultural significance, but really see what made these people or these things so dynamic. And I feel that a lot of these songs are that way too, that you have to really step back and get away from, Moon River or something like that to really appreciate how beautiful they would be if we hadn't heard them 8 million times. And that's an amazing challenge, is how do you bring yourself to something and treat that like it's something new? And that's one thing I love about performing, is there's probably a few songs of mine that I've sung, I would think it 1,000 times, just based on all of the years and years of performing. But every night you get to do it, it's a challenge and an opportunity to treat it in a new way. So I think when I'm up to the challenge, I think one of those very simple, very well-known songs, but one that I can sing, hopefully with a level of intensity and sincerity that will make it feel for myself and everyone else like it's the first time. I don't know if that answered it, but that's quite a challenging question. A wonderful question, but a challenging one, because there's so many wonderful songs out there.
Well, here's a challenging question, I think, for you. Where are you right now?
Oh, that is a challenge too, because, apart from musically where I fit, I just bounce around so much. I actually just got a gig in Cartagena, Colombia. So I'll be down there for a couple of weeks. And I was just in Quebec a few days ago. But I split my time between New York City and Southern California, which for me is a nice blend. I lived in Hollywood for years, and I moved to San Diego about 3.5 years, which has been wonderful for me because I work in Mexico a fair amount, and I've actually gotten to start volunteering in Mexico as well, which I'm really enjoying, and working on another project called La Frontera, which is all about borders and walls, not just the obvious one, which is such, so topical lately, but about between human beings on the internet. So I never expected that when I ended up there, that it would become like being ground zero in the last couple of years for that issue. So that's been a wonderful contrast to New York. But I would say, despite all the places I've gone, and I lived in London for a little, but New York and San Diego, I guess, is the short too. That's as difficult to answer as the musical one, I guess.
Where does that title of your newest album come from, Angel City?
I think on first glance for me, what started it was about my time living in Hollywood after I'd been living in New York, and I moved there. And I think, I've, been up, I've been down, I've been signed to record labels. I've been, I don't want to say dropped from them, but have my, contracts discontinued, which I think it's a very strange time for musicians because it's difficult to be on a record label, and it's difficult to not be on one because, the old traditional model is just completely blown up, and nobody truthfully, honestly knows where it's going. But I found myself going to all these parties with people I didn't want to be with, talking to people I didn't want to talk to, in hopes of some ambiguous dream of making it. And I realized that, as can happen for any artist, if you're not careful, you turn around and you're not even chasing your idea of success. It's this preordained idea of what success should feel like. And as we all know from so many, famous examples, there's no guarantee of happiness with that. And if you buy into that, then inevitably you're going to see people being rewarded for fame and success who should not be, and people who should, not just myself, but, it's just, it's not a meritocracy entertainment. And I found myself getting bitter, which is not a trait that I've ever really possessed. And so for me, it was kind of leaving Los Angeles to love it and kind of write these meditations from the perspective of different characters in there, but also taking Los Angeles more than anything as a state of mind. And I think any city that represents something, New York, of course, or Paris, or in any place that, in a beautiful way, they really are projections of what we believe them to be. And by believing these places to be these things, they attract people, and what became dreams suddenly becomes reality. But, of course, none of these places can live up to the hopes and expectations we put on them. So there's always going to be an element of heartache and a boulevard of broken dreams in any city that's built on dreams. But that is what is beautiful about them, is though we innately can never find it, the drive to find it is what propels us on to, heights of artistic greatness and inspiration. So it's really a search for meaning and for this perfect place that can innately not exist, at least on Earth.
Do you have a residency coming up?
Oh, I do. I've actually been doing it for the last 6 months in New York. It was only supposed to be for 3, and we're extended through January, or it might even be through March now, at a wonderful new venue called Green Room 42, which is in a gorgeous hotel called the Yotel at 42nd Street and 10th Avenue in New York City. And this is the first time in New York City I've been doing a residency, which is this awesome opportunity to try out new songs and I think really show kind of the variety of the different projects I've written for, not just for myself, but for other people, and have some special guests coming in to join me. And it's been really wonderful because each show has been able to be different. I'm working on one in Los Angeles, but we don't have that to announce quite yet. But we should have one starting in Hollywood coming up in February, I think. But it's been great to have.
I was wondering what it was like to have a residency. There was a musician friend of mine, and we were traveling down to Key West. We were looking at this guy, or listening to this guy perform, who performed every day throughout the year at the same place. And he said, Man, that would be so nice. Not having to go and find the point of contact at this place, find where can I put my guitar case? Where's the sound guy? What's his name? Oh, he doesn't want to talk to me. How nice it would be to have a residency. Is he right? Is it a great thing? I imagine a mix of both.
I would say overall, it's a great thing. I think the comfort of knowing the sound guy, of knowing the venue, of seeing it build and having a venue, which I'm very lucky with, that's very supportive of you and what you do and what you're trying to, and that I think in New York City is very rare to find, because I think, there's some very shady and or jaded club owners out there. And it's everyone who works there is really excited and genuinely likes the art. And I think that's one thing that's true about my friends who play a lot at Joe's Pub, where I've also done some shows. And I would say overall, it's primarily a really positive thing. I think, when your commute isn't that long too, because it's very exhausting, especially to do a one-off where you're going, I don't know, to the Philippines for one show and then back, or this one in like Cartagena, as Herbie Hancock, I think once said, they don't pay me to play, they pay me to travel. And that is how I feel. So yeah, anything I've done a few things where it's, I've been at a very nice hotel, and the hotel actually is where the venue is. This particular, gorgeous hotel. I have an apartment in New York, so I just take the train down a few stops at rush hour. The biggest drag, I would say, is just trying to get through Times Square when you're rushing to get to a show, because it's hard to imagine that I was one of these people who enjoyed being in the crowds there. Because now, like any New Yorker, there's a line of tourists from Iowa who are doing exactly what I did when I first came, which is bumping into each other, looking up at all these tall buildings, and all the New Yorkers are like bobbing and weaving, trying to get around them. So that's the only difficulty for me about doing the show, because it's, just off of Times Square. So, stressful for that. But yeah, I mean, in 15 minutes, I'm there. You can't beat that. And it's such a pleasure to play there. It's just been a great experience.
When somebody comes and they hear one of your shows, they go see you, what would be one of the most touching, the most soul-filling things that a fan, someone from the audience, has told you about one of your performances or about your music in general?
Well, one thing that really, because there's a lot of soul-crushing parts, like I suppose there are to any vocation, is, dealing with the industry, people wondering how many Instagram followers you have and all these other things that really have nothing to do with music. But when I get to see, I could be having a day where I'm feeling, kind of frustrated and, before I do the show, not that into it, or feeling, kind of down like we all can get. But, when I get to connect with an audience, I'm able to see in their eyes how much it means to them. And when I've had people come up and say, I love this, you helped me forget about all my problems, what I've always tried to say to them is, I'm really here to help you remember what it is that we may have forgotten. And they help me do that too. They help remind me of how beautiful it is to, be there with other people. And we're hurt by other people, but we're also healed by other people. And they do that for me. In the best nights, it's this really beautiful symbiotic relationship. But a few months ago, I had a woman who came and she told me that her husband had died of cancer a year before, and the last date night they had, and he was so excited to go because they hadn't been able to see me, was to come see me play. And this was one of her first shows, I think, in the last year that she had actually stepped out to go see. And so her telling me that, we both kind of teared up, because for me, I may have had a night where I was just went into it thinking, okay, this will be fun. And then reminded that for her, this evening took on this whole other level of importance. So now when I try to sing, I really try to remember that more than money, the real valuable thing that should always be honored and respected is people are giving you their time or energy. And, I did a show once in Iowa, and there was a blizzard. And so I think there were maybe 6 people there. This is years ago. And, the venue was like, hey, if you want to cancel, that's fine. And the guys in the band, we almost had more people on stage than in the audience. But then we found out that those people had driven, over 3 hours to get there. And if we had canceled it, and it meant so much to them, and it ended up being a really special night. And that's one thing I love about this venue is it's big enough that you have a good amount of energy coming out at you, but it's also small enough where it feels like I can be hosting a party and really have a beautiful, intimate connection with people, and you get to see what it means to them, and that helps it remind you how much it means to you. And that's a beautiful thing.
You know, those 6 people or so in Iowa are never, ever going to forget that night, you know?
If nothing else, for how long it took them to get home. Yeah. Yeah, I hope not. I haven't. And it was a good reminder, because I had a friend I was playing with, and we did something similar to that, I think, a few years before, which for some reason, some nights you're playing for 1,000 people, some nights, it's much less. Fortunately, these days, I don't typically play for 6 people, which is, of course, a challenge. But he wasn't really that engaged, and he was kind of just going through the motions. And after the show, I kind of was like, well, what's that about? And he was like, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's like no one there. And I kind of, in a loving way, reprimanded him to every time you play for someone matters. You also never know who's in the audience as far as, someone of influence or importance. But, every time matters. And for every person, it may just be another night for you. But the audience really helps me out, because they can remind me that it's not just any other night. This present moment is the only one we have. And I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. It may well be the last time I sing, so every night matters. And when you do have an experience like that, the people are helping you remember that as well as you helping them.
Spencer, you're in good company, because I read this article the other day about a very iconic artist, Bob Dylan, performing for an audience of 1. So,
oh wow, that's hard.
No, I mean, he did it intentionally. He wanted to do it. So I thought that was really cool. But that makes me wonder, there's so many singers out there. Who would Spencer Day like to sing a duet with?
Oh boy. Yeah, that is quite a boy. There's so many, maybe Katie Lang. I feel like that would be really good. I feel like our vocal ranges, because she's got this beautiful alto, would be kind of, she sings the best harmonies with other people of anyone. I don't know. I feel like Emmylou Harris would be a pretty great one too. Yeah, there's so many. The girls from First Aid Kit are wonderful. But yeah, I'll put Katie Lang at the top of the list. Why not?
Very cool. Yeah, I thought all of the choices that you mentioned were really good. Great singers. There's not enough First Aid Kit fans as I think there should be.
Oh, I'm glad you know them. I think they're just wonderful. Yeah, I just love them.
What would you say is the greatest well of inspiration for you when it comes to writing?
Thanks. Once again, a very wonderful question. I'm just thinking about it. I think obviously love songs and especially heartbreak, believe it or not, most songwriters, heartbreak propels you to write more than love gone right. Much harder to write from that perspective. And most of your favorite songs, actually, if you dissect the lyrics, the majority of them are actually about either recovering from love gone wrong, saying, I'm going to rise above this, or generally even more codependent, that of how can I ever live without you if you're not in my life. And those are good, but I really like to write from characters or find kind of more of a human perspective. And I think because of everything going on in the world, and even more so in the country, I think for me, that's more inspiring too, is to write from the perspective of other characters. And I'm working on a song from the perspective of a deportee right now. And I'm imagining what that would feel like, and seeing the world through that way, because that's when the lyrics come to me more. If it's just like, write a love song, I'm stumped, I'm there. But if it's like, write a love song between, an acrobat in the circus and, a convict that's on the run from the law, I'm like, okay, give me 30 minutes. I'll knock this out, So I think having specific details and a point of view, but something that still feels universal. There's a few songs of mine that I pulled out last night that I haven't done in a while. One called The Weeping Willow and one called Shadow Man, which is kind of in Carl Jung sense about embracing that we all have the potential for darkness. And until we can acknowledge that, it will keep running us. And to step into the light, we've got to kind of step into the darkness to set your shadow free. Those are probably the ones that I feel when I look at on paper, I'm like, good job, sir, to myself, because it feels really unique and something that, dare I say, feels inspired, that I don't know where it came from. out of me. But that's when I feel the most inspired, is that in some small way, hopefully, I can get people to think, and myself, and think. I never want to preach to people about I have the answers, because I certainly don't. But I want to invite them to search for them with me, about what love means, about what life means, about this mortal coil, and what, what's going on politically, and division, and the desire to rise above that and just be a human. So I think anything that comes from a more universal experience is what inspires me the most, especially lately.
I always like to end the interviews very open-ended, incredibly open-ended. Just to give you the microphone, for anyone who's listening in, what would you say to them?
I think I would say that every day is an opportunity to re-engage with the world and with yourself, and to start again. I think a lot of people are feeling depressed because of all these elements around us that we can't control, but we can't control what happens in Washington, or what happens in Iraq, or all these other places. But we can control how we react to those things and our dynamics with every person. So I guess today, for myself and for them, of reminding them that what might seem like an insignificant thing to you, of sincerely smiling at someone, of sincerely doing what you can do to create a revolution around you, that there's a great amount of empowerment and sense of purpose that comes from knowing that you can only control what's really immediately around you, but that's no small thing. And to remember that the world needs you, and the world needs you to keep believing that we can come together, because when we do that, that's when really wonderful things happen.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by Spencer Day. You can check out spencerday.com. He's also on Facebook and Twitter. Spencer, thank you very much for spending time with us.
Oh, thank you, Paul. It's been a total pleasure.
It's been an honor. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Paul. Thanks so much.
All right. Till next time. Thank you for listening to the Paul Leslie Hour. If you enjoy these interviews, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast. You can help us by listening on the free Radio Public app. The show can also be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, or Overcast. For more information, visit thepaulleslie.com or follow on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, all at The Paul Leslie. The Paul Leslie Hour theme song is performed and composed by Jeff Pike. Outro music is performed and composed by John Goodwin. See you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.